You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all the news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up, right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. and I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Hey Peter, how you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm still in shock about the 9-player trade between the Leafs and the Sens today.
That is a pretty epic trade, but almost as epic, all the different cuts in UFC. It's a clearinghouse the last week.
Jeez, yeah, there were some cuts, and the only thing I'll say about the trade before we move on, there was some interesting stats that came out of it. The last time these two rivals had a trade between them, it was 1997, and the last time the Leafs traded their captain was 98.
That's a long time to go for a captain to be traded.
Yep, so it's a shocker, and the thing is, they play each other in Toronto on March 5th, and they play in Ottawa on March 12th, so you're going to get a nice little home-and-home series coming out between these two teams.
Mm-hmm.
So we got lots of cuts there, and we had a fight night this past weekend, UFC Fight Night 82 from, of all places, Las Vegas, Nevada, like they never go there.
Yeah, I just heard Dave Meltzer say something about that on Observer the other day.
And I was looking at the schedule, and they have pretty much every show up until June at this point. I'm still waiting for a Canadian show to be played.
Well, I think that was part of his point, actually, was that they're overplaying Vegas and underplaying the other markets, and not only that, they're going to burn out Vegas, in his opinion, that people are just going to get tired of paying those prices for Vegas tickets, even though it's the fight capital of the world. You can only do fights there so many times before people are like, yeah, I've seen it. I already spent my $1,000.
I mean, they could probably hit up the San Jose market.
Well, they're probably going to be a little reluctant to run California, but we're going to get into that in the news.
Absolutely, but let's start with UFC Fight Night 82 with Johny Hendricks and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And Stevie, did Thompson look like Wonderboy or Wonder Man in this fight?
Well, it was a wonderful finish. You can say that much.
Stephen Thompson, with some people calling an upset, beating Johny Hendricks, knocking him out at 3:31 of the very first round. And I'm not talking a lucky punch here.
Well, this might be one of those cases where the weight catching of him getting so big and getting smaller to fight at welterweight has finally become too much for him. Now that he has to fight closer to his actual weight because of the whole kidney stone and intestinal blockage thing, he just may not be as powerful as he used to be. He may not be as good as he used to be because he can't get huge and cut down anymore.
So you think he's stuck at this weight now, or?
This might be the new normal.
The new normal, eh? Okay. It's just with this whole weight cutting issue. I mean, we've seen it at one FC. We've seen it in Bellator. UFC's had their issues with certain fighters in weight cutting. So I don't know if he goes from being the big dog in a small pond to being a big dog in a big pond. I'm not saying he's like Samson where he's losing his strength, but I don't know, Hendricks. I'm very curious on his next fight if he still has the problems like he had with Thompson. But Wonderboy, he had a game plan. It was very methodical, and he won. It was strike while the iron is hot, and it seemed to me in this fight that Hendricks was very mismatched. And I was like, am I watching the same fight like from previous Hendricks fights? Like, we've seen him against GSP, we've seen him against Lawler, we've seen him against all the big players at welterweight. So what went wrong here?
I'll stick to the explanation I already gave. I think Hendricks is no longer the Hendricks he used to be. Either that, or you look at the fights that he had with Robbie Lawler, and maybe they took something out of him that he's never going to get back. Like those wars that Cain Velasquez had with Junior Dos Santos. It changed both men, and probably not for the better.
The only thing I could think of, I'm not sure if this is completely accurate, but do you think he underestimated the power of the punch, so to speak, of Thompson?
Maybe he did just a little bit, but I don't know that any fighter should ever overlook their opponent in the cage, because it's like that whole run we went on with Andrei Arlovski. Everybody said he was too old, that he had a glass jaw, this, that, and the other. And then he worked his way up into almost getting another title shot just because everybody who doubted him found out they lost, whether by hook or crook, they lost.
So what do you do with Thompson now that he's beaten a big name at welterweight?
Well, you got to give him a very quality opponent for his next fight, because you beat a guy that's as highly ranked as Hendricks, you jump up in the rankings as a result, and that's exactly what we see now. He's moved all the way up to number 3, and Johny Hendricks has slid down to number 5. So for Wonder Boy, he's really stepped into it now. I'm sure he's happy about it, but he's got either Rory, Tyrone, or the champ. I mean, those are his options now.
I'd give him Aries a number one contenders fight.
You know what? That'd be a hell of a fun fight if they do it.
Put that fight in Montreal or Toronto.
Well, there you go. You're looking for a fight for the Canada market. You just booked it. Congratulations.
I mean, it's not like any Canadian team is going to make the playoffs this year, so you got those arenas opening.
I suppose that's true.
There's a stat out there right now, and for those Canadian listeners, you know what I'm talking about. There was a point, I think it was last week. This is the latest in the season. There's no Canadian teams currently in a playoff spot this late in the season since 69-70.
Wow.
There's only been one NHL season where there have been no Canadian teams in the playoffs. That was 69-70, and that was when there was only 2 Canadian teams. There's 7 now, and if you look at the bottom of the league standings, all 7 are in the bottom third. None of them are in a playoff spot right now.
I don't know if I can call that sad. It's just an indicative stat for the state of affairs of NHL hockey right now, that there's no longer Canadian dominance like there used to be.
Because all the good Canadian players are playing for Chicago and LA and, all the good teams, San Jose. You know what I mean? It's just...
Well, it's also the competitive nature of the marketplace. You've got people that are willing to bid for the highest talent, and that's where they're going to go. They're going to go where the money is.
So, I would love to see a Canadian market get a huge fight like Aries and Wonder Boy. I think Montreal would be the easy one. He had a great war in Vancouver against the National Born Killer. Toronto, I would put that with another, a title fight and have this as a co-main event. But if you put that fight in Montreal or Vancouver, that could be your main event easily.
No argument.
But let's move on to Roy Nelson and Jared Roshold. And if you would have told me this fight went the distance, I would say Roshold won. But no, Roy Nelson wins 30-27, 30-27, and 29-28.
Yep, and it's the first UFC fight he's ever won by a decision. He's been finished, he's finished people, but he had never gone the distance.
I wonder if the first thought in his head when his arm was raised was, are you sure?
I suppose that could be a possible reaction, but probably more like relief, like, oh my god, he's thinking in the back of his head, I'm not going to get cut now. Hooray.
Yeah, well, he saved his job, that's for sure. Was this fight impressive to you, or was it just ho-hum?
It's impressive to me to see him win a fight by decision when every other time he's gone the distance it hasn't gone his way, but other than that, I guess wouldn't call it a super blow-away fight. I think you're going to get that response on 5 out of 6 fights you're going to ask me about, because this really wasn't that great of a card. I mean, we had a spectacular knockout in the main event, and there was one other fight that was kind of okay, but a lot of this card just felt like they ran a card because they had to. They were supposed to have a pay-per-view. They couldn't cancel all these other fights, so they still had an event anyway, but boy, did it feel overshadowed by the Super Bowl this week, and it just wasn't anywhere near as exciting as that.
There were a lot of decisions in this card.
You got that right, buddy.
I was working on this night and was able to catch a few of the fights, but it was like you could almost set your watch to it. Okay, this is going to a third. Okay, yeah, they're going to the judges. I have a couple minutes. But, yeah, Nelson, the right guy, won here. And the same can be said about OSP defeating Rafael Cavalcante 30-27, 30-27, and 29-28.
Well, at least it goes along with what I was saying in our preview that Fei Zhao is no longer the guy he was in Strikeforce, and OSP, even though it wasn't a super exciting performance on his part, it was the dominant performance I expected from him.
And he was injured to boot.
Yeah.
So, Joseph Benavidez beating Zach Makovsky. Unanimous decision. Yay.
Well, the only thing I'm going to say about this is that Benavidez proved once again that other than Demetrius Johnson, he is the man at flyweight, because ain't nobody touching him in that weight class. I mean, seriously, it's him and DJ. They are the two unbeatable guys. This was his 5th straight win. And the last guy he lost to was the champ.
It's true. I'm just thinking this fight here, he was like he was toying with his opponent, not wanting to finish him.
I think that's not giving Makovsky enough credit. He's tough and durable, and he's been around for quite a while. I saw him all the way back in the Bellator days.
Yeah, but Benavidez, if you're the best flyweight outside of DJ,
I mean, I'll even go
you need
one
to sharpen
further.
your finishing skills.
The last 2 losses that Benavidez had are both to Demetrius Johnson. I'm not kidding around when I say this. It's him and DJ. They own this weight class.
All right, what about Misha Kirov against Alex Nicholson? We got a submission here, Stevie.
Yeah, you actually got a finish between 2 guys almost nobody's ever heard of.
So Nicholson taps out to a rear naked choke, second round, minute 28. And Mike Pyle beat Sean Spencer.
Wait, I want to say something about this submission.
Okay.
Don't blow by it too fast here, because we got very few finishes here, so we got to say something about the ones that were. What do you think of when you think of a fresh jar of pickles from the store? What's the first thought when you think of that jar?
It's expensive.
No. I mean, what are you going to do with that jar when you think about it, when you look at it?
It's going to get bitched to open.
Exactly. Now, that's what this submission was to me, was taking the jar of pickles, holding it, and turning with all your might with one arm, trying to get that stupid lid off. That's what this neck crank looked like, was like opening the damn jar of pickles.
Now,
like he was trying to unscrew his head. That's what he was trying to do.
Are you making a sushi bowl reference here, Stevie?
No, I'm serious. I'm saying it looked like he was trying to open the damn jar of pickles right there in the octagon. Like fuck, I'm going to unscrew this guy's head.
It's not. There's nothing inside. There's nothing inside. There's no prize.
Well,
all right,
we can move on now. Mike Pyle saves his job.
Yep, knocked out Sean Spencer TKO late, 4:25, third round.
Yep, did it with just a little bit of time to spare, but thank God, because we needed another finish on the main card. We had a long, boring stretch, so we needed these first 2 fights to get us through the rest.
All right, so the prelims. Berkman beats Nunes, unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. Nunes, I think he's going to get cut. Lewis Grabowski, Lewis wins TKO punches, 2:17 first round.
Okay, this is the thing that frustrates me about Derrick Lewis. Before you blow by, I gotta say something else here.
Okay.
It's Derrick Lewis. I think he's extremely talented, and he's got some charisma, and I'd like to see the guy really get on a run and just totally shake up the heavyweight division in UFC, because Lord knows they could use that. But he beats the guys that he clearly should beat, guys like Grabowski and Juan Potts and Victor Pesta, those guys. And then when you think he's ready to step up to the next level and he gets a guy like Sean Jordan or Matt Mitrione, he gets knocked out. It's like, show some consistency, Lewis. Just give me something that I can hold on to. Like, beat a guy in the top 15 and show me you deserve it. Like, I just get frustrated that he beats the scrubs and then not the good guys.
What about Justin Scoggins beating Ray Borg? Another decision, but this one, 30-27, 30-27, 30-26.
Well, you know what happened as a result of this fight?
What's that?
Scoggins jumps up to number 12 in the flyweight division, and Borg drops down to number 14. So they almost trade spots here.
Wow. Yeah, and I missed this one. I wish I didn't.
The only reason I can't say they technically trade spots is because Scoggins wasn't technically in the flyweight top 15 before this fight.
There you go. I missed this fight, Stevie, but Diego Rivas beat Noad Lahat, knocked him out with a flying knee at the 23-second mark of the second round.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, actually, because Lahat is a great story. This is a guy who left UFC to go serve in the Israeli army. I mean, that's pretty unique among MMA fighters.
Absolutely. And as far as the fight past ones were concerned, Alex White beat Artem Lobov with unanimous decision, and that's the only prelim we're going to talk. No, I was kidding.
Yeah.
Mickey Gall had a thriller of a fight.
He cakewalked through Mike Jackson. He moonwalked through Mike Jackson.
No, Mickey Gall had a thriller of a fight against Mike Jackson.
Call it whatever you want to. It was exactly the result everybody expected. And you know what? Mickey Gall is actually the favorite now in the match with CM Punk.
Okay, just so for the records out there, Gall beats Jackson with a rear naked choke 45 seconds of the first round. He has less than a minute of UFC time, and he's the favorite against Phil Brooks, or CM Punk, or whatever you want to call him. Just don't call him stupid Blackhawks fan.
I'll remember that one if I ever interview him.
Yeah, that'd be... He loves his Blackhawks, what can I say?
He is notoriously testy in interviews these days.
Well, there was a good... he was hosting a Q&A this past week, and there was an interesting exchange, and he just responds with, "No, I have all day. It's your turn. You're done. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Next question. You're done. That guy's done. Bye-bye." And it was like, oh boy. It's Punk at his best. Sometimes the fans can be a little, I'll just say it, flat out rude. And his response is perfect. It's like, you know what, I'm not going to feed the trolls here. It's like, no, I'm not going to deal with it. Next question. Like, does it have to put up with it? I don't blame him.
Well, that's all well and fine if you don't want to deal with that from the fans. But a reporter from Complex Magazine was trying to ask Punk legitimate questions about making the transition from wrestling to mixed martial arts, and Punk reacted so negatively to WWE being brought up that he basically sandbagged the whole interview, accused the guy of being stupid and of asking him stupid questions, and then basically ending the interview, walking away, and his handler coming over and telling the guy, "Punk never wants to speak to you again." Like, dude, don't treat a fucking reporter that way.
Wow, that's
I mean, yeah, he's probably gotten the question a million times, and I'm sure it gets old to be asked about making the jump from pro wrestling to mixed martial arts, but you're doing a feature for a magazine. Roll with the punches a little bit, no pun intended.
Oh, I think the pun is intended on that one.
Maybe so, but I'm getting a little concerned about Punk's ability to handle the scrutiny he's going to be under. If he thinks it's bad now, when his fight's coming up, it's only going to get worse.
All right, so you're right. Gall is the favorite. He's a -300 against CM Punk, but I don't have the odds for Punk here.
I don't think it's unreasonable for him to be the favorite, considering that Punk has never had a professional fight and this guy's had one. And given the fact that he won in such a dominating fashion, that's going to lead odds makers to lean his way. Maybe once it gets closer to the fight time and a lot of people have put their early money in, that line will come down. But right now, that line sounds right to me.
All right, lots of news to get to. I have a few here and there, but I'm going to start with someone we haven't heard from in a while, and I'm not sure if you know about this one. Jason Mayhem Miller is back in the news.
Yes, he's got a fight coming up, but not in the United States.
Nope, it's in Italy, and I don't know if it's in the same city, but Bellator is also running a show in Italy this year.
That's right. I believe their show is in Torino.
What are Todd's odds that Mayhem Miller gets signed by Bellator?
I wouldn't say high. I don't think they really want to deal with the Mayhem madness.
Sounds like a disease you get in a submarine or something.
I don't know what disease he has, but he's had a lot of problems in the last few years, so is it any wonder he's not fighting in the United States?
No. No. I'm not even going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. It's, I don't know what to say about that. All right, so let's just move on, as I try not to laugh too much at that one. Let's talk with Jon Jones. Let's just go with that one.
Sure.
There was some interesting news the same day as Daniel Bryan's retirement was announced by WWE.
Right, and that was that Jones got pulled over for driving without a license or registration, or in fact being able to drive at all. He's not allowed to operate a motor vehicle.
Now he's due in court on Wednesday, correct?
Yes, and as far as I know, since we don't have the results of that yet, what he's going to get, I'm making the prediction based on what insiders have said about it already, he'll get a few dates added to his community service.
So it's a slap on the wrist.
Well, he already got a slap on the wrist, so he's getting a slap on top of a slap.
It's a flick of the wrist.
Yeah, I guess you could call it that, but if he had been operating the vehicle intoxicated, he'd probably be thrown away and they'd forget where the key was. But since all he didn't have was his license, which of course he can't have one right now because it's suspended, or his proof of insurance, which you do actually need to keep insurance on a car even if you're not driving it. That's just a requirement for owning a vehicle. So he did actually have the insurance. He just didn't have it in the car with him, and he didn't have his proof of registration even though he does have it. So they'll probably just go, okay, you shouldn't have been driving a car. You produced all the other paperwork the officer asked you for that you didn't have. So here you go. Don't do it again. Here's a few more days of community service. That's what's going to happen here. If he'd been driving drunk, that'd be a whole different story.
Joseph Benavidez is fighting... Oh, no, not Benavidez, sorry. It's Demetrius Johnson is fighting Henry Cejudo on the card coming up in... Was it late April underneath the Jon Jones-Daniel Cormier fight?
I believe so.
Benavidez was asked about Cejudo's title shot, and Benavidez just basically said that he didn't deserve it.
Well, didn't I just pretty much say that Benavidez was the top guy in the division other than Demetrius Johnson? Of course he's going to feel that way. But if you're looking at this from Dana White's perspective, and we know how he feels about trilogy fights when the challenger has lost 2 previous times, see also Miocic Tate, he's not going to book a third fight between Benavidez and Johnson unless there's a really compelling reason, because Benavidez has already lost twice.
I'm kind of tempted to put money on Tate knocking out Holm, because can you imagine the chaos that would happen if she does that?
Well, that's pretty much the guarantee that there's going to be a third Rousey-Tate fight. This time with Tate as the champion. That would be fun. But I'm not... And
Holm sitting there going, I'm up 13, I got all these boxing titles, I knocked out Rousey. Knocking out Tate's probably next on her to-do list.
That's kind of what I'm thinking too. I feel like Holm's probably going to get that win, but Anything can happen in a fight, and we've seen that many times, including Wonder Boy just knocking out Johny Hendricks. So better believe it, folks. It happens.
Did you see Ronda Rousey's Super Bowl commercial?
I saw so many commercials.
Didn't
I'm trying to even remember half of them at this point. The one that sticks out in my head is that puppy baby monkey thing.
see it.
Really?
They block the commercials up here, but there is a ruling with the CRTC, which is like the FCC in the States. I believe it's either next year or 2018 that Canadians will get the American commercials, not just the Canadian commercials for Super Bowl Sunday.
All right.
So
forget the fact that they didn't show it to you on the live broadcast. Just Google puppy baby monkey.
Purple Monkey dishwasher?
No, puppy baby monkey.
Okay. So Josh Berkman is fighting at 155, and apparently to make weight, he lost 18 pounds in 24 hours.
That's brutal.
That's disgusting. And, I'll probably get in shit for saying that, but, if meeting a weight is a requirement of your job or your profession, and you want to get that advantage by shedding pounds, there's ways to do it safely within reason. If you can cut 18 pounds in 24 hours, your kidneys are either working double time and a half, or you're just trying to get an extra advantage over your opponent.
I guess.
It's just,
I
hate to see what happens to this guy in 6 months.
This might be the time to bring up the latest ruling from the California State Athletic Commission.
Oh, is this the one where they're going to test fighters, but 72 hours before the fight?
Well, that, and they are banning dehydration for weight cutting.
Really?
Yes.
So, no IVs, no dehydration. Wow, they're really stepping up their game on this.
Yeah, well, that's why people think that UFC is not going to run shows in California this year, because they don't want to have to tell their fighters not to cut water weight.
I'm sure we'll have more on this story in the few weeks or months to follow, so just stay tuned on that one. But we do have a main event for UFC Fight Night 86 in Croatia.
Yes, indeed. Stipe Miocic. I guess that's how they're repaying him for not getting the fight with Verdum, is he gets this main event, and all his Croatian peeps will be very happy to see him.
I don't have Stipe Miocic on my card.
Well, you don't?
No, I've got Rothwell and JDS.
I thought it was Stipe Miocic fighting Rothwell. And we're looking at two different cards then?
I'm looking at Rothwell and JDS on my card.
Okay, let me double check.
April
this.
10th in Zagreb, Croatia. It's on FS1, and the early prelims are on Fight Pass. Rothwell is number 4. Dos Santos is number 8.
Okay, let's see. Stipe Miocic. I'm double checking this news.
And the co-main is Ruslan Magomedov against Gabriel Gonzaga.
Hold on. Please, hold on.
All right.
You're making me do research on the air because
I'm trying to entertain the people.
I understand that, but I was under the impression that Stipe Miocic getting the fight in Croatia was a done deal. And now I'm getting inundated with ads. Thanks, MMA websites other than my own. Where is this? Shoot. I could have sworn he was getting that fight.
I heard there was a rumor Miocic was getting a title shot in May.
Yeah, that's clogging up my search results right now. Frig.
Anyways, as Stevie looks it up, we've got JDS and Ben Rothwell on top, Gabriel Gonzaga against Ruslan Magomedov. Let's see what else we see here. Jan Blachowicz against Igor Pajak, which should be an insane fight. And a bunch of local fighters and area fighters. It's going to be an interesting show overall, but with JDS and Rothwell on the main card, on the main event, that with Rothwell's choke, I mean, that's an insane move, and I mean, Barnett look on his face afterwards, it was like, did that just happen? Did I just get choked out? Like, it's not a dirty move, it's just dirty, sneaky, dirty in a good way, so to speak. It's just, he gets like a front face lock, and he just gets the arm under the chin and just nails it, like, perfect. And for a big guy like that, he's at that angle, good luck to you, because you ain't getting out. It's like you owe him money or something, I'm not sure.
Alright.
But as far as the records, JDS, he's 11-3 in the UFC. Rothwell is 6-3 in the UFC. And it's going to be a 5-round fight in Croatia, obviously, because it's the main event. And I don't know about the time zone, because I'm not sure. It doesn't say a time on here for the show.
Yeah, I guess I'm not finding any evidence to back up what I'm saying, but I thought for sure they were putting him on that card because he is of Croatian descent and it's a fight night in Croatia. I was under the impression he was getting a title shot on that show.
Well, we'll agree to disagree right now, but...
Well, you're right in so much as I don't have the proof and I can't find the original source where I read this, so...
Alright. Well, let's move on to 1FC.
Whatever site I saw it on might have been total bullshit. But it made sense. He's Croatian. It made sense.
1FC announced that they did try to get Benson Henderson, and they're going to try to get other free agents down the road. Kind of broke my heart, because can you imagine Benson Henderson against a certain fighter in 1FC that is on my favorites list, and you can't see the air quotations? You know who I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
Can you imagine that fight, Stevie?
I can, but it's not happening, so...
I know.
So
Ben Askren, Benson Henderson. Oh, God, I would be cheering for Henderson in that fight.
I don't know. It could go either way with that one. I like both of them.
As long as he doesn't fight with the toothpick in his mouth, he's good.
True.
Rafael Natal fighting Robert Whittaker at UFC 197.
Don't even know what to say about that, but good luck to them both.
And USADA has confirmed that Yoel Romero did test positive for a prohibited substance.
Well, that's why he was kicked out of the UFC rankings.
Kicked out?
Yeah, I thought you knew that. He's not in the rankings anymore.
Oh, boy.
He was suspended. Everybody else moved up one spot once he was suspended.
He's claiming... Oh, God. Stop me if you've heard this before, Stevie.
Tainted supplements?
Yep. Ding, ding, ding.
What utter horse shit.
Not horse meat, horse shit.
Like, we've been saying this all along about Yoel Romero. Go back to the oldest reference to him on Glove Up or Shut Up, and you and I have both said this. Every time we look at the guy, we always say this. How does he pass the drug test? You look at his physique, you note his age, and you look at him again, and you go, how is this guy passing a drug test? He can't be natural. And he passed every one of them until now.
Now, there is a rule here when it comes to the new drug policy, and take this for what it is, because you got A and B. On one side, you have the rules where fighters should know what they're putting in their bodies.
Okay,
but the other side of the rule...
Hold on, just so you're not confusing people, when you say A and B, you don't mean the A and B sample.
No.
Okay, so move on. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that's not what you meant.
So on one side of the argument, you have fighters should know what they're putting in their bodies. On the other side of the argument, the other side of the coin, so to speak, the rule from USADA is in cases where the athlete or other person can establish that the detected prohibited substance came from a contaminated product, then the period of ineligibility shall be at a minimum a reprimand and no period of ineligibility, and at a maximum, the period of ineligibility for use or attempted use of a prohibited substance. So they could go either way with this. If he appeals it, they could say if they can prove it's a contaminated supplement and physically have the supplement, and this is actually, it is what it is. It is a contaminated supplement. We didn't know it was contaminated at the time. If they can prove it, then in the rules they have an out saying they can reprimand him, i.e., like a fine or something, but they're not going to kick him out. Now, I think if it's his first offense, which it is, they might err on the side of caution and basically reinstate him to the rankings, and it just pushes back a title shot. But if it's legit and he doesn't appeal, I mean, we're all talking speculation and hyperbole right now, but if it is legit and he doesn't get suspended, that's terrible for him because he's right at the cusp of a title shot, and now he's going to be out for, what's the first offense? It's 2 years, 4 years? I think it's 2 years for the first one, right?
Right. The new NSAC ruling, at least, was 2 years for a failed test.
Jesus.
4 years for a second failure.
And third, you're done.
Yep, third lifetime.
All right, so Albert Tumanov is paging, or he's not paging. He's summoning the spirit of Chael Sonnen. He's calling out Stephen Thompson, calling it the matchup of best strikers.
Okay.
Tumanov wants that ranking, I think. You know what I mean? He wants up there. He wants up the ladder.
Well, I got good news for him if he wants to be ranked, because he just broke into the rankings. He is number 14.
All right, so this is the news today on top of my list here. And yeah, Miocic, he's hinting at a UFC title shot in May against Verdum.
Yeah, we
do know one thing. It won't. No. But my point is, one thing we do know: it won't be against Kane.
No.
I heard his back surgery was successful, though. I did hear that.
Yeah, but you got to think at this point.
I know.
The fact that he's having back surgery, that's kind of like the nail in the coffin.
But it's a minor procedure, not a full-blown back. You know what I mean? Like, there's levels.
I get that, but he's been injured so many times, and now he's been coming up short in title fights, and that heavyweight division, the more I see of it, the more I start to wonder how anybody can put together a good heavyweight division in any mixed martial arts promotion, because it just seems like guys of that size, it gets to be too much for them. The full range of training that you have to do, the cardio, the kickboxing, the grappling, the jiu-jitsu, that it's easier for guys that are 205 pounds or less because it doesn't create as much damage on their body. But when you're carrying around that much meat and you're doing that much training, it just seems like the body breaks down that much faster.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I think he should be a coach.
This is why guys are getting second runs late in their career, like Arlovski, because that heavyweight division is so shaky that a guy puts together a few wins and suddenly he's right in the mix.
Well, I mean, I think he should be a coach or, really consider what he has left in the tank, so to speak. But yeah, your body breaks down when you get older, especially in MMA.
Well, that's why I'm saying even more so in these bigger weight classes. The higher up you go, the more it seems to tear you down, because it's the same thing we see in the NFL, if you want to be perfectly honest about it, because NFL players are basically heavyweights. I mean, other than your running backs and some of your corners and safeties, we're talking about, especially on the lines, the guys those are 300-pounders. Those are heavyweights. And
I made the joke last week, where's the beef? You watch the O-line.
Right, that's what I'm talking about. And those guys, a lot of them only have 2 or 3 years in the NFL and they're done.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to another interesting development, this time in Bellator. Bellator 151 has a new co-main event, as Michael Page is pulled out, and Fernando Gonzalez has a new opponent, the now former champion from RFA, Gilbert Smith.
Yeah, and moments before we went on the air, and I do mean literally like seconds, this was confirmed by one of the PR representatives at Bellator MMA. He said, quote, "I can confirm the story on Junkie is correct because MMA Junkie was the very first to break this news."
That card, Bellator 151, the main event is Darian Caldwell against the ever so lovable Joe Warren.
That's right. Whether you love him or hate him, you definitely know him.
And if you watched the Fight Master, you had an opinion of him.
Oh, definitely. I think if you've been watching Bellator since the earliest days, you have an opinion of him, because you can't watch Bellator without knowing one way or another whether you love or hate Joe Warren. He's been there since the earliest days.
Now, we do talk Bellator. We got one more news note, and that would have to be Bellator's newest signing. Tell me if you've heard of this guy, Stevie. Chris Leben.
Yes, the Crippler is the newest addition to the Bellator roster, and you have some reservations about it. They're probably the same ones that I have, but why don't you go ahead?
To put the label on Chris Leben that he's a troubled soul is putting it mildly. He's seen some rough wars, both in his personal life and in the cage. They probably threw a lot of money at him to come out of retirement. There are some particular interesting matchups he could fight in Bellator, but I don't know. I mean, if you want to play fantasy matchmaker here just for a second, do you think when Chuck Liddell's career was winding down and Bellator was in the position where they could throw him some money like they probably threw at Leben, do you think Chuck Liddell would take it?
I can't say for sure, because you're asking me a question that actually is not the ideal example, because we know for a fact that Chuck Liddell really, really, really loved fighting.
Absolutely.
That guy couldn't let it go, because even though he was losing fights over and over, he just loved being a fighter. He loved everything that went into it. It took Dana White sitting down with him and having a heart-to-heart and saying, "This is not good for you anymore. As a friend, I'd really like it if you didn't fight anymore. Please do this for me. We'll take care of you." I don't think Chris Leben was getting that same offer from anybody in Zuffa, because he hadn't done the things for them that Chuck Liddell did. Although you could argue that by being a star on The Ultimate Fighter and making that show popular going forward, he did plenty in his own right, but he didn't do the things that Chuck Liddell did. So I say that respectfully, just to draw the difference between the two, and not because I'm trying to take anything away from the Crippler at all, because he had a lot of fun fights, but I was also glad when his career was done, because things were starting to not go well for him at the end.
His fighting style of, look, I'm bleeding.
His self-described,
I'm going to fight better now.
His self-described style is, "I have a button in my nose, and when people hit it, my fist pops out." He has said this in interviews. That was the way Leben fought, was smash me and I'll smash you back. You hit me hard, I'll hit you harder. That doesn't lead to longevity in the sport.
I like it when someone calls it the Adam West offense. I'm like, what do you mean Adam West? I'm kind of scared by that, but what do you mean? You punch him in the face. Oh, look, I'm a tomato. And then he gets pissed off. Like, oh, damn it.
Yeah, and he's had, as you said, he's a troubled soul. He's had problems. He's had substance abuse problems. He's had run-ins with the law. It seems like every time you just about think that Chris Leben has his shit together, he pulls a Mayhem Miller out of his ass.
Now, my last question I have before...
I just used Mayhem Miller as a verb. You can quote me on that.
The last question I have before we do our closing plugs. We had the Super Bowl this past week. We had a lot of odds. Everything from the coin toss to the will Beyonce's outfit have cleavage to how many points will it's crazy bets. You know what I mean? What are the odds do you think right now? Let's do Todd's odds again for this last question, Stevie. Do you think Jon Jones will actually fight Cormier in April, or will his troubles, what we saw this week, do you think something will happen and he'll be taken off the card?
I think Dana White will hire a limo driver for Jon Jones. If you're asking me if he's going to fight in April or at any point early this year because they need a big draw and because him trying to get the title back would be a huge fight, yes, it's going to happen. The only way it's not going to happen is if Jon Jones fucks up in a very major way that we haven't seen him do. So my Todd's odds would be 80% chance this fight's happening.
So I mentioned this before, but when I saw Daniel Bryan retirement, I'm like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. And then I refreshed the screen and it said Daniel Bryan retirement news, comma, Jon Jones trouble. And I'm like, oh, for crying out loud.
You were reading my Twitter feed, weren't you?
Maybe.
So
but
anyway.
it was like, are you serious? Like, and then I had that shiver go right down my spine where it's like, okay, Jones, what'd you do this time?
Hey, on the list
you need a license to drive a car? Oh yeah, I need that.
On the list of stupid shit he's done, this probably isn't even top 5. This isn't wrapping your Bentley around a phone pole. This isn't testing positive for cocaine on a drug test. This is a minor infraction in the list of stupidity for Jon Jones, and that's saying something.
I wouldn't want to be the guy who told Cormier that Jones is in trouble.
Never be the bearer of bad news. It's an old saying. It goes back to
with his
medieval
head.
times. Exactly.
Yep. All right, Stevie, what's on tap this week for AMP?
Well, you've already said it a couple of times in this show, and I think it's patently obvious what we're going to talk about. Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson, American Dragon, and Daniel Bryan.
The only thought I could think of, well, I had many thoughts on that subject, but since this is an MMA show, I have to ask, do you think if MMA was at this point back then when Danielson was coming up, do you think he'd ever choose mixed martial arts?
I believe he was asked that question in an interview that I heard and said that he grew up loving pro wrestling. He wanted to be a pro wrestler his whole life. He found a wrestling school in Texas and went there and trained with Shawn Michaels, and it confirmed what he already knew. It was what he wanted to do, and it's always what he wanted to do. Yeah, he likes grappling and jiu-jitsu, and you can even see some videos of him grappling on youtube.com/AngryMarks.com, but he likes it because it adds something to his pro wrestling, not the other way around. This guy was always going to be a pro wrestler. There's few people. The reason it's so heartbreaking that he retired is because he loves pro wrestling as much as we do. And that's the end of the discussion for now. You want to hear more? Listen on Thursday.
The only thing I could correlate to mixed martial arts is the concussion issue, but you could take any sport, baseball, football, hockey, MMA, wrestling, whatever sport you have. The concussion discussion you could have in any sport now, and in 10 years, 15 years from now, it's going to be a very scary situation when these guys who are getting rocked this badly now, like that movie Concussion with Will Smith, like that's a great movie. If you want more information on that, go check out that movie. It gives you a really good idea with some little spins here and there, but if you've got take it with a grain of salt in certain areas, but it kind of shines that light a little bit. And with long-term effects, like with your Jens Pulvers, your Chris Liebens, your Chuck Liddells, you're gonna have fighters that these long-term effects. It's kind of scary.
Peter, you might as well have not even said that's our show. What's on tap for Thursday? Because you can't open the discussion of concussions and then expect us to wrap the show in 5 minutes or less, because this is an issue that's going to affect not just, like you said, not just MMA, not just football, but every professional sport played everywhere, because the whole nature of what we know is based on previous knowledge that's now backed up by science. We always knew that getting hit in the head too many times had negative repercussions, because you can look at the term punch drunk, and that tells you there's something bad about being hit in the head too many times. But now we have these studies where they've actually, at the Sports Legacy Institute, they've gotten donations of brains from retired athletes that have passed away and looked at them and saw these markers for chronic traumatic encephalopathy that basically you could only get these markers in your brain from repeated concussive blows, because it causes the tau proteins in your brain to break down and basically give you dementia and Alzheimer's early onset before you should ever get them. So there's going to be limits to not only what people can do in sports, but limits to what people growing up playing sports can do, because your brain is very vulnerable at a young age. You can't take the kind of blows that you can take as a full-grown adult. Not that anybody should, but definitely shouldn't when you're still developing and you're still growing. There may come a point where you're going to find things like hockey and tackle football are just outright banned for youth. Like, you're not going to be allowed to do them.
It's a different situation. It's a different era now.
What we're learning is making us all aware that you're being paid to take a risk. That there's just, we've said this all along about mixed martial arts. You and I have both gone into it, loving it and understanding it, knowing that they are highly compensated for taking high risk. But everybody's going to have to evaluate that for themselves when it comes to professional sports. What level of risk is worth what level of reward? And if you're not good enough to make a lot of money doing it and provide very well for yourself and your family, then maybe it's not worth the risk. Like, if you're the kind of guy who's going to end up playing, I'm just going to use this as an example, and I mean no offense to them, but arena football or Canadian Football League. Like, if you're going to be at the lower levels of the sport and make like $20,000 a year, is it worth it for a lifetime of chronic injury and possible early onset of Alzheimer's because you're taking those kind of hits? It's probably not worth it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a discussion we're going to have for weeks and months to come.
It's definitely going to be an ongoing discussion because it is a concussive sport that we're covering here. That's sort of the point, It's what fans pay to see. They want to see flashy highlight reel knockouts. They want to see one guy drop another guy with a kick or a punch. That's what everybody comes for.
And just one last little news bit just to change topics before we go on. It looks like Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres is going to be done with the weight cutting, and he's saying he's going to stay happy and stay at 145.
Well, again, that's also changing nature of the sport as we know it. A year or two's time, this may be a completely different world that people don't cut weight.
Good.
Yeah, if it happens, I don't think it's the worst thing. I think it might be better for everybody involved.
That means Jon Jones is going to be at heavyweight? Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that, especially with his physique these days. He looks like a heavyweight.
Jacked to the gills.
No doubt. Speaking of people, you wonder if they're going to pass the test or not. Holy shit.
Him against Verdum.
That would be a fun fight. I believe Jones actually said in an interview that he'd like 2 or 3 more fights at light heavyweight, and then he's moving up.
Yeah.
So,
he wants Cormier and the Mauler, and who was the other one? Was it Rumble?
I think so, yeah. I think we talked about this last week.
We did last week, yeah.
All right, so anyway, we tried to wrap up this show, but once we got into concussions, that wasn't going to happen very quickly. But I will say this. Since you've mentioned Todd's odds over and over throughout this show, I'm going to send him an invitation either tonight or tomorrow to come back on our show within the month and talk about these issues, because there is a lot that we can gain from his knowledge, just as people listening to us can gain more knowledge by hearing what we talk about and looking it up for themselves.
Well, let's do a plug for next week, because next week is a big Bellator show.
That's right. Shamrock versus Gracie 3. If you want to know more about that card, sorry to not plug our own site or our own show, but MMAmania.com, because I'm interviewing fighters from Bellator 149 all week long, and within the last 24 hours of you hearing this show, they posted my interview with Dada 5000.
Have you spoken to Kimbo Slice yet?
He is doing a press conference next week, and I will probably be calling him for that. So if I speak to him, it'll be then.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for the show this week. For Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening. And as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya.